Hello everyone, Avery Young here, and welcome back to another episode of the Storyteller's Corner. Now, it's no secret that this... my sound, curse my sound. It wouldn't be a live stream of mine if something weren't going wrong. Alright, anyway. Now, as I was saying, it's no secret that the fairy tales of the modern age have become softer over the years. I refer to, of course, adaptations of stories like the Disney films, like those of Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, The Little Mermaid, etc. Now, there's nothing wrong with these, not by a long shot. In fact, I grew up with these film adaptations of these stories myself. However, these aren't the original forms of these stories, as back in the Renaissance and the Dark Ages, when these stories were told, they were told by adults for adults, and they were made by adults. And as such, these fairy tales that we all know and love in their original state definitely had some adult themes in them. This, of course, being the case of the fairy tale we're going to be reading, which is, as you can guess by the red that I am wearing and the hood on my jacket, the story that I'm going to be reading to you today is Little Red Riding Hood. Now, Little Red Riding Hood, like other fairy tales, have gone through multiple adaptations over the years. This, of course, being one of them. This isn't an uncommon thing, as, again, these stories in their original forms predate the technological era. So back then, if you wanted to record a story, you had to write it down, or another way of passing it on was through oral storytelling. And one key concept of oral storytelling is when you have multiple people telling the same story over and over and over again, certain elements of the story change. Be it one of the classics, nice, yes, Andre Smith, but yes. When you have multiple people telling the same story over and over and over again, little details of the story change. Like what Red Riding Hood brought to her grandmother, what the wolf says, the presence of certain characters like the huntsman, and so on and so forth. And oftentimes the ending will change, in which the wolf devours Grandma and Red Riding Hood, but then the huntsman comes and he cuts open the wolf's belly and he saves them. And Red Riding Hood learns her lesson about straying from the path. However, the story that I'm going to read to you is the original quote-unquote adaptation by Charles Perrault, who was a French author. And I am reading his for a few reasons. One, the ending certainly takes people by surprise. And two, again, these original stories had some adult themes, and well, there are some underlying adult themes in here that I thought would be interesting to read. And again, this isn't the first time adult themes have been in original fairy tales. It's subtle, but there is that symbolism of adult themes, i.e. the wedding bed test. Usually this is... Hi, Akira. Here, I'm going to be reading a fairy tale, Red Riding Hood to be precise, but yes. In original fairy tales, there's that underlying theme of, and it's subtle, of adult themes, i.e. the wedding bed test. This is usually the case of a fairy tale in which the main character heroine has been killed or kidnapped or stolen away by her evil stepmother and stepsisters, and the stepsister takes the bride's place as the king's wife. And a way to test if it's really the princess or the main character, kind of, but not right. This sounds like the phone game where people tell each other's story until it gets to the last person. The story at the end is usually nothing like exactly Crazy Anime Gamer, but again, these stories predate the technological era, and so you either wrote the stories down or you told them by mouth. Those were the only options they had at the time. Anyway, what I was saying with the wedding test and tying in with the adult theme is that, again, main character, the princess or whatever, disappears, and her evil stepsister takes the place of the main character as the king's wife. And as a way to test if it's the real wife or not, is the king will say, okay, tell you what, I'll lay with her in bed, and if my sword is hot, then it's my wife. If my sword is cold, then it's not my wife. Again, it's subtle, but if you know, you know. So yeah, heavy adult themes in the original fairy tales, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to read this adaptation of Red Riding Hood, which is found in the Blue Fairy book. Another reason why was it shares the same theme as The Hare's Bride, in that the ending isn't happy. The phone game actually existed long before phones ever did. Phone game is just, that's what I understand through around my grandparents this time as kids. How fascinating, crazy anime gamer. But yes, that's another one of the reasons why I wanted to tell the story, is that the ending breaks away from the traditional happily ever after that a lot of fairy tales, even further down the road of the originals, had their happily ever afters. So, without further ado, let's get into the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Just gotta make sure my whistle's wet, so that way I don't start coughing. Alrighty. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there lived in a certain village a little country girl. The prettiest creature was ever seen. Her mother was excessively fond of her, and her grandmother doted on her still more. This good woman got made for her a little Red Riding Hood, which became the girl so extremely well that everybody called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother, having made some custard, said to her, "Go, my dear, and see how thy grandmamma does, for I hear she has been very ill. Carry her a custard and this little pot of butter." Little Red Riding Hood set out immediately to go to her grandmother, who lived in another village. As she was going through the wood, she met with Gaffer Wolf, who had a very great mind to eat her up, but he durst not, because of some faggot makers hard by in the forest. And for context, a faggot in this story is basically a bundle of dried sticks. That is what faggot means in these fairy tales. Just letting you know. It's not a slur. It's literally a bundle of dried sticks. Anyway, back to the story. Okay. Hard by in the forest. He asked her whither she was going. The poor child, who did not know that it was dangerous to stay and hear a wolf talk, said to him, "I am going to see my grandmamma and carry her a custard and a little pot of butter for my mamma." "Does she live far off?" said the wolf. "Oh, aye," answered Little Red Riding Hood. "It is beyond that mill you see there, at the first house in the village." "Well," said the wolf, "and I'll go and see her too. I'll go this way and you go that, and we shall see who will be there the soonest." The wolf began to run as fast as he could, taking the nearest way, and the little girl went by that farthest about, diverting herself in gathering nuts, running after butterflies, and making nosegays of such little flowers as she met with. The wolf was not long before he got to the old woman's house. He knocked at the door. Tap, tap, tap. "Who's there?" "Your grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood," replied the wolf, counterfeiting her voice, "who has brought you a custard and a little pot of butter sent to you by mamma." The good grandmother, who was in bed because she was somewhat ill, cried out, "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up." The wolf pulled the bobbin and the door opened, and then presently he fell upon the good woman and ate her up in a moment. For it was above 3 days, and he had not touched a bit. He then shut the door and went into the grandmother's bed, expecting Little Red Riding Hood, who had came some time afterwards, and knocked at the door. Tap, tap. Who's there? Little Red Riding Hood, hearing the big voice of the wolf, was at first afraid, but believing her grandmother had got a cold and was hoarse, answered, "'Tis your grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood, who has brought you a custard and a little pot of butter Mamma sends you." The wolf cried out to her, softening his voice as much as he could, "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up." Little Red Riding Hood pulled the bobbin and the door opened. The wolf, seeing her come in, said to her, hiding himself under the bedclothes, "Put the custard and the little pot of butter upon the stool, and come and lie down with me." Little Red Riding Hood undressed herself and went into bed, where, being greatly amazed to see how her grandmother looked in her night clothes, she said to her, "Grandmamma, what great arms you've got!" "That is the better to hug thee, my dear." "Grandmamma, what great legs you've got!" "That is to run the better, my child." "Grandmamma, what great ears you have got!" "That is to hear the better, my child." "Grandmamma, what great eyes you have got!" "It is the better to see, my child." "Grandmamma, what great teeth you have got!" "That is to eat thee up." And saying these words, this wicked wolf fell upon Little Red Riding Hood and ate her all up. And yes, that is how the story ends, with Little Red Riding Hood being eaten by the big bad wolf, along with her grandmother. No huntsman, no nothing. Now, like fairy tales of the original, these fairy tales were, of course, influenced by others, but then they also had morals to them, which I find refreshing. Of course, these morals commonly being don't talk to strangers, there's always a way to turn things around, etc. Now, with the Tale of Red Riding Hood, there are quite a few morals you can take away, i.e., listening to the advice of your elders, never stray from the path, and, of course, don't talk to strangers. There's nothing wrong with these morals, not by a long shot. However, when you get down to it, when you get down to the brass tacks of Little Red Riding Hood, it is a cautionary tale about sex. And even Charles Perrault, his moral ties into that theme. Because not only do you have the wolf being the predatory beast, yes, Andre Gibson Smith, it's a very shocking ending, but yes, when you get down to it, this Tale of Little Red Riding Hood is a very cautionary tale about sex. You have the wolf being the symbolic predator, and then the Red Hood is often a symbol for the, awakening, with the color red being heavily symbolic of emotions such as lust, passion, and those desires. And as I said before, even Charles Perrault, the original author, quote unquote, of the story, his moral ties into that theme. Now, his quote is not in this adaptation, but I did find it online. The quote is as follows. Moral. The moral. Children, especially attractive, well-bred young ladies, should never talk to strangers. For if they should do so, they may well provide dinner for a wolf. Oops. I say wolf, but there are various kinds of wolves. There are also those who are charming, quiet, polite, unassuming, complacent, and sweet, who pursue young women at home and in the streets, and unfortunately, it is these gentle wolves who are the most dangerous ones of all. And he does have a point. I mean, this day and age, such things do happen still. However, that's not to say that all men are wolves. Because not every fairy tale gentleman is a horrible wolf or a beast or a villain. And there are plenty of fairy tales involving women who are plenty evil on their own. I, of course, refer to Snow White. So Disney Into the Woods musical have Little Red Riding Hood who scream horrible. Yeah, the Into the Woods definitely tried going back to the source material of these stories. And it does, of course, with Johnny Depp as a wolf, it definitely ties into the story of Red Riding Hood very well. And it does end with the baker freeing them. So it still follows the source material, just in an adaptation, which I have an adaptation right here, where in the end, the wolf still eats grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood, but the ending changes. So, it's at page 79, but this was the other adaptation that I have. With these words, the wicked wolf leapt upon Little Red Riding Hood. He was just about to gobble her up when a hunter, who had earlier seen the wolf pass by in the direction of the cottage, burst through the door and saved her from certain death. It does not mention the grandmother being saved. However, in other adaptations, it also has the huntsman saving both grandmother and Red Riding Hood. And again, Red Riding Hood says, well, I'll never stray from the path. I've learned my lesson, which sometimes that's not the case. And sorry, but obviously we can learn from experience, though sometimes there are some lessons that shouldn't be learned through experience, because Akira mentioned Little Red Riding Hood. The connection is unstable. Hurrah. Okay, there we go. We're back on. But yeah, as I was saying before, Charles Perrault makes a point with the moral saying, young girls should not talk to strangers as they might make a meal of a wolf. Again, tying into the story being a cautionary one about sex. And again, that's not to say that all men are horrible. As again, in fairy tales, even the originals, not all of the fairy tale gentlemen are horrible wolves or monsters. And again, there are plenty of women in fairy tales who are just as evil. Of course, you have the classics. You have Snow White's wicked stepmother. You have Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters. You, of course, also have the witch from Hansel and Gretel. And you have Mother Gothel, to name a few. But in one fairy tale in particular, specifically the necklace of Princess Fiorimond, I don't have that story yet, but in that story, the main character is a princess with a penchant for black magic, and who gets rid of her suitors by turning them into beads for her necklace. There's evil men in fairy tales, but there's also evil women in fairy tales. To put a bow on it, if you were to ask me, well, Avery, what do you think the morals are in this story, which is kind of messed up? Well, I could pull away two, as far as I know. These, of course, are the ones that jump out to me the most. Do with them what you will. Moral number 1, listen to the advice of others. We don't know everything when we're born. And even as we grow, while we do know things, we do accumulate knowledge, we still don't know everything. And there are people on this earth who have been around a lot longer than we have. And so it doesn't hurt to take people's advice with a grain of salt, learning from them. Because the ways we learn from watching others' mistake, we learn from hearing of them, and of course we learn through experience. And again, there are some lessons that no person should ever experience. Moral number 2, be careful of who you trust. There is evil in this world, and there are evil people in this world. However, these people who are evil, they look just like everyone else. And they're not like the poisoned dart frogs in the jungle. They're not brightly colored. They don't wear neon signs. They don't have a sign on their neck that says, hey, I'm a terrible person. I'm a monster. Don't trust me. You'll get hurt. They don't have those. So you have to be careful with who you trust. It doesn't hurt to get to know people. However, just be careful. Keep your eyes and your ears open. And if you start getting a feeling in your stomach, like a prickly pit feeling, or your stomach twisting into knots or sinking, then that is your gut trying to tell you something might be off here about this person. Even when this person is seemingly the nicest, most loveliest, most delight of a person. If your stomach is giving you a sinking feeling and saying, I don't like this, then go with your gut, because that is your survival instinct kicking in, trying to preserve your life. We've had that instinct for centuries, and it doesn't hurt to use it nowadays. Like the devil in disguise. Yes, Andre Gibson Smith. A lot like that. And again, we don't know. Some person may seem innocent and lovely, but then they might just be very terrible. And so those are the two morals that I would take away from the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Listen to the advice of others and be careful with who you trust. Because it's a dangerous world out there, and if you're better prepared and you have knowledge, then maybe you might be able to avoid getting eaten by a wolf. But those are the two lessons that I would pull away from there. Avery, I learned that lesson about who you can trust. Well, I'm glad you learned. Oh, they left a lot of comments. So, Akira and Darkstalkers have Little Red Riding Hood named Baby Bonnie Hood, who have a single Uzi gun and a missile. Huh. Well, again, that just goes to show how fairy tales have inspired the media, and how, like, again, the Disney movies, we have video games, like with Akira mentioning Darkstalkers. And, she left another one. Well, media made Little Red Riding Hood have weapons like Ruby Rose, having Crescent Rose, and Baby Bonnie Hood with guns. Yeah, exactly. Which, again, it's another reason why I love fairy tales, is that they inspire us, even after even after the centuries that they were made. Little Red Riding Hood ASMR, that I want to see. Well, we'll see. I did make a Goldilocks and the Three Bears ASMR, so maybe. I do got one ASMR in the works. I'm currently trying to draw that out, but we'll see what happens. Again, I don't know if any of you read the post I have, but I've been dealing with a toothache lately. I'm gonna see if I can get that sucker pulled tomorrow. So yeah, but I got a Monster Girl ASMR in the works, and yeah. You want to play Would You Rather, Akira? Tell you what, if you try sending me a message on Discord, then I guess we could try playing Would You Rather. But yeah, that'll just about do it. That was the story of Little Red Riding Hood, one of the adaptations, of course, by Charles Perrault. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a very good day, a good night, or a good evening, and we'll see where the next story goes. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!